Morning everybody, and welcome to another episode of Allotment Days. It's Sunday, May the 8th. It's about 9:30 in the morning. The mist is just about burned away and it's about 15 degrees up here in West Yorkshire, and it promises to be another beautiful day with temperatures of about 23-24 degrees. I've not done an upload for about 4 or 5 weeks, mainly because of the weather. It's very cold, very windy. We've had storms, hail, snow. It's been really atrocious, and I used that 4 or 5 weeks to get some of the heavy work done. Moved a lot of manure from down at the manure dump. Over on the horizon there behind the big greenhouse. I have to walk all the way down past the trees there at the bottom and up the hill here. It's about a 150 metre walk there and the same back, and it's a lot easier when it's cold and there's no sun on your back. So I'm going to give you a tour of the allotment. You can take a look at some of the work that I've done and you'll be able to see what I've sown out directly into the soil and how things are coming along in the greenhouse. So I'll give you a tour of the plot. We'll take a couple of views from different perspectives so you can see how things are developing. See you in a moment. So this is the first allotment. You can see at the start of the 2 beds in front of me we've got all the onions planted out, the onion sets, and also the shallots. We had some onion sets left over and they weren't started in the greenhouse, they were just left in the bag, but they were planted out as well, and you can see at the start of the bed opposite me, they've started to come through in the last week. They're now about 3 inch high, some of them, so they've really shot up in this last week. Seems to have had the good weather. On the bed to the left there, just above the onions, I've planted or sown 6 rows of parsnips because we want lots of winter crops. They've just started to germinate in the course of this last couple of days with the warmer weather. The leeks are still in. Some of them have gone to seed. They're on the last legs now and they're going to come out, and then we'll put some more potatoes in there maybe at the start of June, the middle of June, so that we've got like a second crop of early potatoes coming to maturity maybe the back end of August. And on the far bed you can see under the cloche my peas are out now. They were in guttering in the greenhouse. I put those out about 4 days ago, and just at the right time to coincide with the good weather, and they're growing on okay as well. So that's the first allotment. Allotment 2, you can see there we've got the broad beans in, 4 rows of broad beans, the overwintering onions. They're coming on, they're just starting to fill up a little bit at the bottom, becoming a little bit more bulbous. They'd really not moved for a month or 2, and I've pulled overwintering onions at the end of May before, but I don't think they'll be ready that early this year. It's probably going to be the middle of June, towards the back end of June. The bed just to the other side of the long path, the central path, that was covered with about 1 foot of manure in November, and that's just been dug over and the soil looks really well. You can see there are 2 stakes about 2/3 of the way up, and just put a row of gladioli in. That bed's going to be for cut flowers, so we're going to have dahlias at the front, and then planted successionally gladioli, sunflowers and a few other odds and ends. Rhubarb's coming on nicely as well, that's starting to thicken up, although we lost quite a few leaves with the frost. So that's the second allotment. The third allotment is really only a half allotment, and it's devoted mainly to fruit. So you can see around the edge here are some summer fruiting raspberries, and then there's a bean frame that's been trenched out and filled with peelings and green waste, and then a layer of manure, and then it's been covered up with soil. In front there are 3 plum, actually 2 plum and a green gage, and they've been in blossom and the blossom's gone now. And then beyond the bean frame we've got several rows of strawberries that were nibbled by the rabbits earlier in the year. They seem for the best part to have come back. And beyond that, the other side of the path there, we've got lots of fruit bushes and about half a dozen apple and plum trees. Inside allotment 1 now, and there the shallots a little bit closer up. You can see they've starting to thicken up a little bit. They're growing on really nicely. The rest of the bed is still to be worked and planted up. We're going to put probably 5 or 6 rows of Brussels sprouts in there. Over onto this bed we've got the onion sets, white and red onions, and then a few smaller ones towards the edge here that were just planted straight into the ground as sets with no green shoots on them. Now you might not be able to see them, but the parsnips have just begun to poke the heads through. We've got 3 different varieties, 6 rows: Albion, Gladiator and White Gem. And if I were to take you a little bit closer, you'd see that they've just started to come through, although I'm a little bit concerned that they might be a little bit patchy. But I put 6 rows in because parsnips are known to be a little bit unpredictable. Even with fresh seeds sometimes there are problems with germination, and of course I put them in, and then we had about 2 weeks of really bad weather. But with a bit of luck we should get several decent rows, and if they're patchy then they'll be planted in with something else like beetroot or something like that. It's not the end of the world. On the legume bed I've got the peas in that were in guttering, and they're about, I'd say maybe a foot tall now. Watered them last night knowing that it was going to be a really hot day today. I broadcast some dwarf French beans here in a broad drill yesterday. Stanley the variety are called. The peas were Kelden Wonder, and just above at the top of the bed I planted some Monge too, and they're just starting to come through 1 or 2 tips of the plants. Over in the corner here, this is where I thinned out and replanted younger strawberry plants. They're coming on okay. They've not grown very much because the weather was so poor. And at the back, as I promised I would earlier in the year, I've subdivided the 2 comfrey plants. I've now got about 8 or 9, as you can see. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and the others are just covered with manure. I think there's about 8. Apple trees, some of them at least, are in blossom. That's a baking apple. Blackcurrant bush is in flower. The red currant comes out later, but that's well on its way as well. The potatoes, this is 6 rows of early potatoes. They've just started to show in this first row. There's a couple of 2 or 3 potatoes showing their heads, and we put in 3 varieties in here: Charlotte, Nicola, and one other that I can't remember the name of at the moment. Might have been Foremost or something like that. In the small greenhouse The pots of potatoes are also doing quite well at the back. I've got the 3 pots of kestrel and then about 4 or 5 smaller pots of Charlotte. They're all growing nicely. On the left, in the 45 litre pots, if you remember, I put in the Sapo Mira and they're coming through well. The pot at the top there, they're coming through as well, but I topped them up a few days ago, and so I buried the tips of the plants, but they're all growing quite well. At the back, on the table, sunflowers have really shot up. They've gone mad this last week. They were about 2 or 3 inch high at the start of the week, and now look at them, they're a foot high. So I'll harden those off and probably put them out in the next week or so. To the left are the climbing beans, and they were only put in module trays at the start of the week, and they've just started to pop through. I could have done them earlier, but the weather was atrocious, and once you get a good spell of weather they really shoot up. So I'm hoping within the next week and a half they'll be several inches high, and then they can be planted out on the first bean frame in the first allotment. A few more trays of kohlrabi. The first batch were a little bit patchy, some damped off, some suffered with the frost, but I've done another. I've got some more as well actually in the other greenhouse, because they're such a tasty crop and they grow quite quickly as well. You can eat the tops and you can eat the bulb at the bottom. So that's the first greenhouse. Just show you the strawberries as well. The same strawberries here as are in the little bed just outside the greenhouse, and these are forming strawberries already. Lots of flowers, whereas the ones outside, if you remember, I'll just turn around and show you, they're nowhere near at the same stage of development. There might be an odd one with a flower on, but they're small. They've not really moved over the last 3 or 4 weeks. Inside the fruit cage, some of the currant bushes are really progressing well. You can see the one in front, that's covered in flowers, and that looks like that'll be heavy in fruit. The others are all newer, they're only a year, 2 years old, so we may not see much of those this year. But still, it's heartening to see everything greening up. The soil needs a weed, and then that's going to be mulched with manure, and we're hopefully in this next week we're going to cover the fruit cage with chicken wire so that the developing fruit's safe and protected from birds, otherwise we'll have none. So that's the fruit cage. I'll take a look at the fruit cage from a little bit further back as well. So there it is, the fruit cage. It's a fair old size. We've got about a dozen plants in there. A couple of trees in front, a cherry to the left, that's it in blossom at the moment, and an apple to the right, brought down from home. It's a little bit big, but we'll try and keep it small. That's coming into leaf as well. And looking back over the second allotment, you can see the rhubarb, that's doing nicely. Just to the left of it, I've done a couple of short rows of beetroot and broadcast beetroot. I always broadcast, 6 or 8 inch wide in a drill, and put plenty in. They can be thinned out, that's not a problem. The space above where the beetroot are is reserved for sweet corn, so I'm going to get my seed corn sown this coming week, and hopefully we'll get a block of maybe 60, maybe 8 by 8, something like that. Take a closer look at the overwintering onions. As you can see, there are white onions and red, and they are starting to thicken up. The white ones, you can see they're starting to form the bulbs, perhaps a little bit more so than the red ones. And the red ones, for some reason, although as usual they were bought as sets, the red ones, many of them, I don't know if you can see it from here, have subdivided, and You can see there one has actually got 3 bulbs growing out of the set, but there are lots of others with 2. So we'll have more onions, but they'll be smaller. It's not something I've seen before, but it's probably quite common. But I would say about 40% of the red overwintering onions have actually split into 2 bulbs. The broad beans, they're about a foot high now. 2 different varieties, 2 rows of each. The 2 rows on the right, they yellowed a little bit. They suffered in the poor weather. The ones on the left, I think they're an F1 hybrid, and they seem to have fared a little bit better. The bed at the start of the second allotment, we're going to put brassicas in there, cabbage, and the day before yesterday I'd built up a stockpile of spent hops. I had 6 sacks because I get them from a local brewery, and I mix them in with my compost, but I spread them over the top, break them out, had about a 2-inch layer, and then forked it all in, and they act apparently as a good soil conditioner. They're quite a mild additive to your soil, but they are a good soil improver, as I say, and over the years they're supposed to make your soil a little bit crumblier, and this is quite a heavy clay soil, so hopefully the hops will do the trick. The autumn raspberries that you see around the edge, they were all transplants from the other side of the fence there. They've been mulched with manure, and as I said, while it was really cold, I barrowed lots of manure onto the site. In the last 3 weeks I've barrowed about 140 barrowfuls of manure, and that's the last batch, but I've also gone round all the borders, as you can see there, around the raspberries to mulch, around the fruit allotment as well, around the edges. It'll break down there. For the most part it's just a path, there's not really anything planted in there, but it's not mixed in with the soil, it's just over the top, so it'll act as a weed suppressant, and as it breaks down, maybe at the end of the year, we'll dig that in, so it'll have been broken down. It's already probably about 6 months old. It's not fresh stuff, but it'll break down more, it'll be very, very fine, and it'll get dug in. And this is the flower bed, if you can see it, because the sun's very bright now. It's lovely soil. We've dug in, as I say, a layer of manure that was already 6 months old, went on as a top dressing in November, and it's just been dug in, and the soil is fantastic. So we're hoping to plant this up with flowers. This is the small orchard with 6 trees, 4 apple and 2 plum. I picked them carefully to make sure that they didn't all ripen at the same time, so they ripen between September and December, and they've got different storing abilities. Some will store probably till December, January, and others right up until April or May, so I'm hoping to be able to store apples this year. I've mulched all the area around the outside of the orchard as well, and you can see in the middle I've left that, and that's because I'm hoping to put my first raised bed in there to make use of the available ground in the middle, because the trees are quite small. I can always remove the raised bed if I need to, but I'll probably put the kohlrabi, some swede and turnip or something like that, to take those items out of the other beds, so it frees up the other beds and makes the most of this area of ground as well. And thankfully all of the apple trees have come into leaf, or are starting to. They are different varieties and some are later, so that may explain to an extent why they're a little bit slower. But if you remember, the bark on the base of the trees was all but completely nibbled away by rabbits that got into the site. But I treated the trees with heal and seal solution, painted it on. I'll do that again in a week or two, and because it has to be done in dry weather, but it seems to have done the trick, and the trees don't appear to have taken on any infection or anything, and they've started to come into leaf. So, and they were quite expensive trees, you can get them cheap, but I went to a specialist nursery, R.V. Rogers, and they were quite expensive, as I say, so I'm glad that they've survived. So that's the orchard. Inside the large greenhouse, I've just got the kohlrabi and Brussels sprouts. I've just got to put these. I've just arrived on the plot, so I need to put these outside. I've been hardening them off this week because it's been better weather. So I've been putting them out the first thing in the morning and bringing them back in at night. And another couple of days of that. Then if the weather holds, then they're just about big enough to be popped out selectively. Some are big enough, some aren't. And at the back here, you'll see in the middle there, cucumbers. The first sowing of cucumbers that I did, they all came up lovely. The Burplus, the Armenian yard long, and the lemon cucumbers, everyone bought it with the poor weather. They just damped off, so I had to do a second sowing. And this time I've not put them in the propagator, I've just put them in pots in the large greenhouse and just allowed them to germinate on their own, and that's coincided with the weather improving. So it just shows you, you can sow too early if the weather takes a turn for the worse. I'm sure everybody's had this experience. Certainly a lot of the videos that I've watched on YouTube, it's been the case. People have lost lots of things and had to re-sow. So hopefully we'll not get any more really bad weather, and it'll stay settled. You can see at the back there, I've managed to keep a couple of cayenne peppers, a couple of aubergine, but the others have died off as well. More kohlrabi here, spring onions, and sown a couple of trays of broccoli, a speedy variety and then a normal variety. One takes probably about 8 weeks and the other will be ready in the autumn. Pots in the back, the small pots, the 3-inch pots, I've put some courgettes and pumpkins in the other day, and then at the back there, they've not germinated yet, some rudbeckia for the borders. So that's it for the big greenhouse. In a couple of days I'll probably end up filling this space with sweet corn, but that's it for the greenhouses. The other difference that you might notice from previous visits to my channel is the paths. In the cold weather I also extended the paths up to the fruit cage, down beyond the shed, and then managed to salvage some more slabs, and I can now get around the entire site a little bit more easily than with dry feet. So that's it. I've used the cold weather to mulch the site with manure, laid some more paths, dug some beds, and at last the weather's improved and we've started to plant out as the seedlings. So hopefully I'll get another update done in a couple of weeks' time and I'll have a little bit more planted and the place will start to look a little bit greener. So until then, have a great time, enjoy the nice weather. Take care, bye.